Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hooked on Movies podcast. Today, we will be looking at the 1980 sequel, Star Wars, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. With me are Ken.
No, I am your father.
And Ted.
I don't know where you get your delusions, laser brain.
And hey, everyone, I'm Eric. I will see you all in hell.
We're already there. We're on the podcast.
We're already there. We're talking Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, if you are keeping track. Ted, give us the details on this one.
Okay, The Empire Strikes Back is directed by Irvin Kershner, a screenplay by Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan. It has a running time of 124 minutes. It was released May 21st, 1980. It had a budget of $30.5 million and a box office gross of $538 million. The Empire Strikes Back stars Mark Hamill, again, as Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford as Han Solo, Carrie Fisher as Leia Organa, Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian, Anthony Daniels as C-3PO, David Prowse as Darth Vader, James Earl Jones as the voice of Darth Vader, Peter Mayhew as Chewbacca, Kenny Baker as R2-D2, Frank Oz as Yoda, Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan, Kenneth Colley as Admiral Piet, and Julian Glover as General Veers.
Reviews. I'm sure the reviews on this thing are just totally awesome.
I was able to find some on both sides. To start off with, we have our Rotten Tomatoes. The critics score is a 94% certified fresh, and an audience score of 97%. Neither one of those are a big shocker. On the negative side, Joy Gould Boyum of the Wall Street Journal said, "A Star Wars that has not only lost much of its humor and charm, but more important, a good deal of its innocence, traveling in the process light years away from the shiny first magnitude of its original world."
Wall Street Journal, they wanted more money in it, right?
I guess.
More stock quotes?
Right? Eric Shorter of the Daily Telegraph UK said, "It's hard to place one's affections anywhere in a world which is ruled by buttons and dials, computers and bleeps, and people whose conversation is technical, inaudible, or dull." I don't know exactly what he wanted, but I guess it wasn't this. But then, on our positive side, we'll start with Gene Siskel from the Chicago Tribune. He summed up his review as, "It balances bloodshed with charm, spectacle with childlike glee. It's a near flawless movie of its kind." And of course, Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times. He said, "The Empire Strikes Back is the best of the three Star Wars films, and the most thought-provoking. After the space opera cheerfulness of the original film, this one plunges into darkness and even despair, and surrenders more completely to the underlying mystery of the story. It is because of the emotions stirred in Empire that the entire series takes in a mythic quality that resonates back to the first and ahead to the third. This movie is the heart." That's it for our reviews.
All right. Well, let's talk about the first time we saw this movie. Let's kick it off with Ted.
I'm going to take a page out of Ken's playbook. The first time I saw this was on paid cable. My grandmother and my grandfather had Cinemax way back in the day. And the first time I would have seen this, they were playing this on Cinemax all the time. Like, literally all the time. Like, every time I would go over to my grandparents' house, this was on. So, this is probably the one that I've seen the most of the original three because of that. Ironically, the other movie that Cinemax played all the time along with this was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So I've seen that one more than the other Indiana Jones movies. It's kind of weird how it all worked out. Yeah.
How about you, Ken?
Through the years.
Well, I didn't watch it on Skinemax like Ted did. Probably watched the
was
entire.
A kid, dude.
Hey, I don't know what you watched back then. I mean, I don't know what your parents allowed and didn't allow back then.
Dude,
so
I was like 5.
Okay, early starter. The Empire Strips Back. I get it. I actually saw this in the theater. My dad took me to see this. He took me to see the first two Star Wars movies. He did, for whatever reason, didn't take me to see the third one. I think he was just done with Star Wars by then, because that's not his thing. He was just being nice to the kids. When I watched it in the theater, I do remember a lot more of this because it is a few years later, and I was about 8 years old when this came out. I do remember being more understanding and being more in shock with the reveal of Darth Vader, his true identity, which we'll get to later. So, and then, I've watched it a whole lot of times. I'm not in the same vein as Ted, who needs to watch it on a monthly basis, but I definitely probably catch it maybe once or twice a year.
Well, for me, I'm also taking a page out of the Ken playbook. Cable TV for me, I don't know which one I saw, and I think I saw it at a friend's house, but I do remember seeing it on television. I never seen it in the theater. I'd love to see it in the theater. I think that'd be really cool, but I probably watch it maybe once every couple years, if I'm throwing out the trilogy there to just watch them. But no, other than that, that's about it. Ken, you want to tell us the plot of this one?
So 3 years after the destruction of the Death Star, the Imperial fleet, led by Darth Vader, dispatches probe droids across the galaxy to find the Rebel Alliance, with one probe locating the Rebel base on the ice planet of Hoth. A Wampa captures Luke Skywalker before he can investigate the probe, but he escapes by using the Force to retrieve his lightsaber and wound the beast. Before succumbing to hypothermia, the Force spirit of Obi-Wan Kenobi instructs Luke to go to the swamp planet of Dagobah to train as a Jedi Knight under Jedi Master Yoda. Han Solo discovers Luke and insulates him against the weather inside the deceased Tauntaun until they are rescued. Alerted to the rebels' location, the Empire launches a large-scale attack to capture the base, forcing the rebels to evacuate. Han and Leia escape with C-3PO and Chewbacca aboard the Millennium Falcon, but the ship's hyperdrive malfunctions. They hide in an asteroid field where Han and Leia grow closer amid the tension. Vader summons several bounty hunters, including Boba Fett, to find the Falcon. Evading the Imperial fleet, Han's group travels to a floating cloud city, which is governed by his old friend, Lando Calrissian. Fett tracks them there, and Vader forces Lando to surrender the group to the Empire, knowing Luke will come to their aid. Meanwhile, Luke travels with R2-D2 in his X-Wing fighter to Dagobah, where he crash lands and meets Yoda, who reluctantly accepts him as a Jedi apprentice after conferring with Obi-Wan's spirit. Yoda trains Luke to master the light side of the Force and resist negative emotions that will seduce him to the dark side, as they did Vader. Luke struggles to control his anger and impulsiveness and fails to comprehend the nature and power of the Force until he witnesses Yoda use it to lift the X-Wing fighter from the swamp. Luke has a premonition of Han and Leia in pain, and despite Obi-Wan and Yoda's warning, he abandons his training to rescue them. Although Obi-Wan believes Luke is their only hope, Yoda asserts that there is another. Leia confesses her love to Han before Vader freezes him in a carbonite to test whether the process will safely imprison Luke. Han survives and is given to Fett, who intends to collect his bounty from Jabba the Hutt. Lando frees Leia and Chewbacca, but they are too late to stop Fett's escape. The group fights its way back to the Falcon and flees the city. Luke arrives and engages Vader in a lightsaber duel. Vader overwhelms Luke, severing his right hand and separating him from his lightsaber. He urges Luke to embrace the dark side so they may rule the galaxy together, but Luke refuses, citing Obi-Wan's claim that Vader killed his father, prompting Vader to reveal that he is Luke's father. Desperate, Luke drops into the air shaft and is ejected beneath the floating city, latching onto an antenna. He reaches out through the Force to Leia, and the Falcon returns to rescue him. TIE fighters pursue the group, which is almost captured by Vader's Star Destroyer, until R2-D2 reactivates the Falcon's hyperdrive, allowing them to escape. Aboard the Rebel fleet, a robotic prosthesis replaces Luke's hand. He, Leia, C-3PO, and R2-D2 observe as Lando and Chewbacca depart on the Falcon to rescue Han. The end.
All right. So let's kick this one off. We'll start with the beginning of the movie where we are on the planet Hoth and the Imperial Star Cruisers are firing their little probes onto the planet to probe for life.
Not anal probes.
I did not say that.
I didn't say that either.
Of course not.
I think it's an interesting way to start because it's so different from what we see in Star Wars where we have that big cruiser, attacking the rebel ship, which is so much smaller. And here you see these little probes coming out of the ship that are being sent down below, where we find that the rebel base is very, very, very cold. This makes Antarctica look like a tropical summer home or something. In fact, when they were filming this, it was some of the worst winter conditions that they've ever had in that area. You could tell that people were just miserable. It's amazing how well they made this look based on the conditions out there. I think it's a very interesting way to start things off, and we're kind of eased a little bit more into it than the original Star Wars was.
Don't you think it's odd that they can't find them on this big ice planet? They have no idea where they are.
They escaped to this planet, so you have to figure that, it's a big galaxy, so there's probably thousands of planets. They're on this
because we know they're sending out thousands of probes.
Probes, right. I love the difference. I guess it would be the complete opposite of Tatooine, where Tatooine's a desert planet, and this is a
big ball of ice.
But Ken was right. They filmed this in Norway. It was miserable from all accounts. That all the filming that they did there, all the exterior stuff was pretty miserable.
Yeah, all the temperatures are real and everything, right?
Yeah, and then they did shoot a lot of the interior stuff at Pinewood. I really like the fact that, of course, like all Star Wars movies, that starts with the ship, but then it immediately cuts, and we get to see a new droid, the Imperial probe droid, which I think is really kind of a cool design looking thing. It certainly gives off menace. It doesn't look friendly. I think it's kind of cool. And then we cut to see Luke riding around on some animal that we learn that it's a tauntaun. Like Ken said, we started with a battle to start the next movie, but the crawl sets it up perfectly that the Empire is searching. So there wouldn't be necessarily a battle just right off the start. I think it's kind of cool.
So they're sending these probes all over the galaxy. Mm-hmm. They're very menacing looking.
And it's only because of Vader's insistence that that's where they're at. I mean, it's not luck of the draw. Vader feels some type of presence there that makes them check that place out.
They get the pictures back from the probe droid of the shield generators.
Right, and I mean, the probes themselves don't automatically explode. They have their little self-destruct thing.
But you still have the Admiral that's still like, no, it can't be that. It's got to be somebody. That's probably something else completely.
Yeah, and, in the first movie, we know that Darth Vader is a villain, and we know that he's menacing. It's The Empire Strikes Back where we find out his true viciousness. He literally chokes 3 people to death.
All I know is you don't want to be an Admiral.
He keeps appointing new people to that position.
Oh, yeah.
You're in charge now. Like, oh, shit.
Yes, exactly.
He's truly scary here.
And you kind of see now who he reports to. So he's not top dog, right?
We really get to see how menacing and really how diabolical he is. He's evil. And
I think he's been voted as like the top villain, or at least top 3 villains of all time.
AFI named it, I think it was number 3.
In the first movie, you're in the same room when he chokes you. Now you just have to be on a video screen for him to choke the life out of you.
Exactly.
He's got some range now. He's in one area and he's in a different area and he still chokes the life out of him.
He's like, oh, Lord Vader, everything is... All you could now just be like thinking of a thought, and all of a sudden you think you're choking on food, but it's Vader killing you.
So going back to the ice planet here, you have the Wampa that captures Luke because he's going to stay behind to look for, he thinks is a meteorite, but it's actually that droid. The Wampa basically knocks him silly off of his tauntaun. Then he kills the tauntaun and then drags them both back. This is a very intelligent creature because somehow he sticks him in ice onto the ceiling and have him hanging down. Now, originally, we don't see that creature in the original film.
Correct.
So the question is it better to now see the Wampa?
Well, we do get to see him briefly in the original.
Is this that out of focus
like
when he's lunging at him?
It's a side view, right?
It's very quick. No, you get to see him straight on.
Do you?
Okay. But yeah, you could tell it's a person in a costume.
It's
definitely a costume person.
What? It's not real?
Now, the special edition versions, they extended your view of the Wampa a little bit more. But before he gets his arm cut off, you do get to see him. The crazy thing is, in the original draft of the script, the Wampas were supposed to be a thing. Because if you notice when Han and Leia are walking down the corridors of the base, There's some doors that have the yellow warning tape on them because there's a whole subplot that there were wampas in the base and they would randomly kill people and like suck people in. And so they had to put these doors up to contain these wampas. And that's a whole thing that was cut from the ending script.
It's
That's
interesting
crazy.
because Luke and Han even say that they don't believe there's any life on this planet whatsoever. Now, there would have been a subplot.
I think that what they're saying is human life. I don't think that they're talking necessarily about animal life, because the wampa's an animal. The whole thing was cut from the script, the final.
Let me ask you
filming
then,
script.
besides the random tauntaun, what is the wampa supposed to eat?
Exactly.
What else is out there for them to
I'm
eat?
assuming tauntauns.
Well, and I don't even know if tauntauns are even indigenous
random
to
humans.
this area because they die in the cold.
Here's the thing. They are indigenous to Hoth. This is all stuff that's fleshed out in the years between the original trilogy was done and when The Phantom Menace then came out. This all was filled in. They are indigenous to Hoth. The reason that they're able to stay warm is, I guess, they make burrows. They make habitats for each other and they sleep in groups. And that's how they stay warm and that's how they survive. But
So if they're
on
running
their
solo,
own-
no dice.
Right, exactly. There's a bunch of different books that you can get that'll give you a lot of the background on a lot of this, but they don't answer a lot of those sort of questions. The coloring book got filled in detail after all of the movies were done with Return of the Jedi. I mean,
Wouldn't it have
the
been easier
universe-
for Luke just to kill this wampa?
He doesn't know that it's behind him. The tauntaun knows it's behind him because it can smell him.
I'm talking about in the cave itself. You know, after he chopped off his whole arm, you have two options. You could either kill this wampa and stay in a cave and be warm, or go out in the cold and freeze to death.
Yeah, it seems like he's much more afraid, and I think that it's just a human reaction to try to get as
That's a
far
good
away
point,
from it as
Ken. Yeah,
possible.
it is a good. I never thought about that because in the cave he's somewhat warm.
Right, inside of some sort of domicile where it's got to be warmer in there than it is outside, of course. The only thing that you can really chalk it up to is that he wants to get as far away from there because he doesn't want to get eaten. And he probably should have just killed it. George Lucas doesn't like having his heroes actually kill things. Look at what he's done with Han Solo with the
Yeah.
whole Greedo thing in the first
Yeah.
movie. He's changed it so many times. So Han doesn't shoot first.
It's like the Batman thing. You don't want your Batman character to like kill
Right.
people. You just want them to hurt them real bad, chop off an arm. That's fine, but
Yeah.
you know, let's not kill him. I guess I get it. I don't know about him being scared because Luke is one of the more brave
He is,
people.
but I mean,
you know.
it'd be normal to want to get yourself out of that situation. It's a fight or flight.
I mean, he's got the edge. He's got a lightsaber. He already
Yeah,
chopped
chop
off
the
one
thing's
arm.
head off.
I'm just providing like the devil's argument, the devil's advocate here, as far as
Yeah.
an argument. To me, I don't understand why he doesn't kill it and stay there, but he also knows, too, that if he stays in there, he probably doesn't get found for quite a while. And how
That's a
long
good
is
point.
he really going
That's
to
a
be
good
able to
point.
survive? He takes his chances and is just lucky enough that Han is looking for him.
Maybe, but I mean, he could have waited at least until the morning because it seems like you have a better chance to survive in the
Oh,
morning
then-
than you do at night. So
Then Han probably dies.
not necessarily because Han has equipment to set up shop, I guess, because Han stays overnight in the cold. And the only reason why, and this is the other thing I don't get, Han sets up camp for himself, but the only way to keep Luke
Only-
warm is by sticking him into a tauntaun. So,
Well, just until he can get the
body
tents-
temperature back up.
Yeah.
the tent set up, yeah.
Yeah.
Because he knows that he's freezing to death. So to get him back, keep his temperature up, he sticks him in the tauntaun. But he can set up the tent or whatever that is, a little living space that they set up, and then they can be warm inside there.
Well, so then Han would have been fine if he'd stayed overnight and waited for him.
There's definitely arguments to be had on both sides of that.
I mean, the way
One
they
of-
make it, like CP3PO and R2D2 make it sound like that there was no way that even Han could survive out there, but he has all this equipment that should be fine.
I don't think
So-
that they're taking that into account when he's doing his odds.
Well,
I
he's
think
a
they're just saying that.
shitty droid for, not computing those odds. So, but it is fun for us to speculate. I don't remember
It's-
seeing the Wampa in his face and in the costume. I only remember a side view.
I remember it being out of focus and fuzzy as he's lunging at Luke.
It's very brief. It's very quick. It would be very easy to not remember.
Again, that's why we need a copy of the original to compare. I mean, we have some stuff that we can go on YouTube. Sometimes those get taken down.
No, they do. That's why I have an original cut that I can watch, and we'll talk about how bad that gets with Return of the Jedi. And we're kind of glossing over here. One of my favorite parts of the whole opening sequence is Han and Leia. They're going back and forth after he tells General Riken that he has to leave because he has a death mark on him. Their whole back and forth, and she asks, "I'd rather kiss a Wookiee," and
I can arrange
that.
He needs a good kiss.
One of the cool things about that whole scene in the hallway, that's the two of them, and they're solely focused on each other and the back and forth, that even people walking by or walking between them,
right,
it doesn't matter, that they're so tuned with each other. I really like that scene a lot.
Those people are probably like, they're at it again. I'm just going to walk by and ignore it. What I love about that, you're taking a serious thing with what's going on with Luke, and then you're offsetting it with a romantic comedy here on the side. Again, I'm a big fan of taking something that's really serious and then taking something that's kind of silly, romantic and stuff, and kind of leveling it all out. So we're not bogged down with so much seriousness here. It brings the audience back, because there is another story here. And the good thing about Empire Strikes Back is we have multiple stories going on at once, and they're somehow really well balanced. And we could say that that's because of Lucas's story, but I like to think it's also because of the director that he got here, who treated it more like and he even says this, more like a fantasy than a science fiction film.
Yeah. Lawrence Kasdan wrote the final draft. Like the whole Wampa thing that I was talking about, that was a lady by the name of Lee Brackett. She wrote the original screenplays. And then Lawrence Kasdan came in and wrote the final draft. While Lucas gave the outline of kind of what he was looking for, it was Kasdan who put the finishing touches on this. And that's why even the dialogue is a little bit better, because George Lucas doesn't know how human beings talk to each other.
That's true.
So Lawrence Kasdan is able to get that, and the conversations are more natural and normal, so we get more of that.
Did he also write for Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yes, he did.
And that's how he got this job, right? Because
he and his son wrote The Force Awakens, directed by J.J. Abrams. His son also then wrote The Rise of Skywalker.
Okay.
So, to end everything out. Yeah, Lawrence Kasdan is definitely a driving force here. And I think a lot of the choices that he makes, they're really good, like the Han and Leia thing. This whole way to start on Hoth is just, in my opinion, is just a really awesome way to start. When the Empire does come down and they drop the AT-ATs or AT-ATs, there's a big debate on how that's pronounced, but the walkers, those are awesome. I think that that's just really freaking cool. I mean, those things are unstoppable until they figure out that you can use the harpoon and
take out its legs. Yeah.
The thing that always made me wonder was what happens when they hit the ground. Does it all of a sudden become vulnerable? Because then they can be shot by blasters.
I saw that, yeah.
So, I wonder the reason why they were able to destroy that one that hit the ground was because of how it was positioned, and they were able to shoot inside of it.
Okay.
Like right between where the
the
neck is and the rest of the body. I think that's how they were able to destroy it. For me, I don't like something that's just totally indestructible. There's got to be a way to take it out. And I mean, they figure out with the harpoon, but I wish it wasn't just that. Because, I mean, when that walker shoots what it has, it can take out the shield generator. Where are the shields at this particular time?
Well, they were up.
I guess they weren't up that well.
Well, because that's why General Veers tells Darth Vader that he can start his descent, because they're going to take out the shield generator.
Right, but I would figure something would protect the shield generator, but I guess it doesn't in this particular situation. Also, we also have Luke that's able to get his lightsaber to get in there, and he's able to throw a grenade. Yeah, cut the belly and throw a grenade in there and watch that explode. I guess it has its weak points. But here's the thing. Wouldn't it be better for them to have just focused on getting everybody to safety?
Out.
Because, Yeah, because these things are not slowing them down in any type of way. You should have realized, after first tried to shoot them, that this isn't going to work. Retreat, get as many people as possible out of there.
Yeah, your ground forces aren't going to do anything.
No, and you're basically just sitting there around just waiting to be picked off one by one. It plays really no purpose other than it just looks good. It's fun to watch. But in reality, like I said, they're not slowing anybody down. It'd be best for them to concentrate more on getting the ships away and firing up those shots up against the Empire above so they can get their transports gone.
Well, I think it does what it's supposed to do. It establishes the fact that Leia has to go with Han, and Luke is escaping out the back door with R2 to go to Dagobah.
I understand all that. I'm just saying that in reality, they don't really need to do that.
It's a space opera. It's fantasy. There's a lot of that, too. I mean, what they're trying to do is slow them up enough to get the ships off the planet and back to the rendezvous point.
That's why I wish they weren't indestructible, because of the fact...
Where are the ships going?
The rebel ships, when they leave the planet, they're going to the place where they rendezvous at the end of the movie.
I don't think we really know, do we? I mean, unless it's in other books and...
It's in some...
Oh, so it's nowhere in the movie that tells you where they're going to go.
No, they just call it the rendezvous point.
Sure.
Right. We'll see you at the rendezvous point. But it would have been better if they were able to slow them down. And eventually they would lose. Then that scene plays out a little bit better for me. Still great scene. Don't get me wrong, because I enjoyed it as a kid and I still enjoy it as an adult. But for my mind that works now, as I've gotten older, and I'm like, well, wait a second. They're not slowing them down at all. They're not buying any time. That's why I'm saying I wish they were able to show a way for them to slow them down, where it made sense for these people who gave up their lives for others to escape.
No, I understand what you're saying. It's almost like that they've never seen these before.
They allude to that, yeah.
And that's why they sent the speeders out to try to slow them down, and they didn't realize what they were getting into.
They only took out 2 of them. From what I could see, I think there's a deleted scene where the one that actually blows up the shield generator, I believe, actually gets destroyed as well.
It does, yeah, because that's why we never see General Veers again.
He go bye-bye.
Yeah, played by Julian Glover, who will reappear in another George Lucas movie, The Last Crusade.
As what?
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He plays the other artifact hunter.
Oh, I was just about to say, is he that guy? Yeah, okay. I could see it now.
Very popular character actor. But I also love the scenes of Darth Vader in the tunnels to try to get to the Millennium Falcon. While everything is white, it's still kind of dark, and the lights are kind of flashing, and you see him walking through. He's so menacing and so commanding at that point. It's really a cool look. In a movie full of really neat scenes and pictures, I think that's one of the coolest.
I think him standing over all the destruction that he just caused kind of helps that too. It's like, look what I did. I took out your little base here and it's in shambles. But then, of course, they escape into the Millennium Falcon. And, of course, for whatever reason, the Millennium Falcon cannot get any type of hyperdrive. Yeah, because he's fixing it the whole time. How is he supposed to leave when he can't even fix his own darn ship? He's like, I got to leave, General, but you know what? My ship doesn't work.
There's always something to fix on the Millennium Falcon. But that's one of the fun things about the Millennium Falcon, though, too.
It's always breaking down. It's a great ship.
There's always something to be fixed.
You just bang on it.
Right?
It's like an old reliable car.
I like that Chewie's working on it and he's getting mad at him for not helping him. It's like, okay, I'll help you when I get back.
All right.
Chewie shows a little bit more frustration with Han in those parts, but when it comes to the ship. I mean, it's cool that how they get away. I love the C-3PO is trying to keep up with them, and it almost seems like they're going to leave C-3PO behind. Typical. I think
it's almost like he's talking to us. It's kind of debatable whether he's breaking the fourth wall there or not. It's kind of cool.
I actually would say out of all 3 of the original trilogy, this is my favorite C-3PO. Because he's kind of got attitude. He's kind of the third wheel.
Oh, clearly the third wheel.
Definitely.
In this relationship. Every time Han and Leia try to get it on, he kind of like shows up, kind of breaks the mood. So,
what are you doing?
And I think it's him being separated from R2 allows him to show more of his personality and maybe a little bit of versatility, a little bit. He's a coward sometimes, and then other times he's like
angry at Chewbacca for putting them together wrong. Yeah. Just opinionated and demanding and entitled.
That's what I like, his entitlement for a droid. Yes. Like, he's complaining about them going into the cave. Why are we going in there? Why, they had to shut him down because he just wouldn't shut up. I think when we get to Return of the Jedi, people might like him a little bit more there, but I find him a little bit more annoying in Return of the Jedi, where here I find him to be kind of like the perfect offset to Han and Leia.
Because now our stories diverge. There's two separate stories being told now after we leave Hoth. Is there one of the two stories that you find more interesting?
I think it's a really good balance between the two, and I think that's why this movie works as well. It does. The things that we need to get from Luke's story, we need those things. And it's important to see those things. But then on the other side, we see the development of Han and Leia as they grow into that relationship. I think they do a really great job of progressing that along, where it's not too much. It's just like the right amount of sexual tension that we get. And then when we later on get to the Cloud City, we really see the love factor, how much Han cares for Leia and how much Leia cares for Han. Until that point, I love the fact that it's playfulness. Like, he's holding her and she goes, let go. And he goes, I'm sorry, She's like, I'm not turned on. And he goes, well, we don't really have time for anything else. It's that fun little back and forth that they still have, but it inches closer and closer each time to them falling in love. And I love the pacing of that.
When they're in the little room, that's one of the only times that Han ever calls her Leia.
Right. It's always your worshipness.
Princess.
Your holiness. Or...
your eminence. Yeah, I would agree with Ken. I think the chemistry between both tangents there works out well. I think it definitely plays. One doesn't overshadow the other. So you really have the two paths that are taken in the movie, and one is not overpowering. So you can really kind of focus on both of them and see how they hopefully eventually will merge in the third movie, if you will. But yes, I think it's done very well.
It's just the right amount, too. It doesn't stay with one thing too long. That helps a lot. I think also having the cutaway on the Star Destroyers, what's going on with Vader, I think that helps break up the two stories just enough as well. I love how Vader becomes so obsessed with getting the Millennium Falcon. I love that becomes his sole focus. It's a good distraction.
I think it helps that we have, on the other side with Luke, a new character with Yoda. The fact that we're getting to know this new character, because if it was just Force Ghost Obi-Wan that's kind of training him, we've kind of already done that in Star Wars. So we needed a new character. I love how they bring Yoda in. They bring Yoda in as kind of a comic relief to start. He's messing with all the stuff. He tries to steal the little flashlight, and R2 tries to take it away from him, and he just bangs on him with that little stick.
Yeah, you kind of don't know who he is. You think he's just some random whatever. You don't know that he's an actual Jedi Master.
Yeah, I think we all know that he's a Jedi Master, but we love the fact that he's playing with Luke's mind first, because he's testing Luke's patience right there. Because what's most important for a Jedi to have is patience, clarity. Yoda tries to teach him throughout this whole time frame, and Luke just consistently fails because Luke is a little too eager, too impatient. That's because he's too old, as Yoda would say. He's learned too many bad habits.
He's too much like his father.
Too much like his father. But the thing is, Yoda knows at the end of the day, Luke is that hope. I know they mention that there is another, and I know they're mentioning Leia, but that never gets fulfilled. And maybe it would have been fulfilled if Carrie Fisher didn't die in the sequels.
Well, the reason that that's all there is because Luke was supposed to have a sister. In the original first drafts of the script, Luke's sister is somebody completely different. The sister was even hidden from Obi-Wan. So that's why Yoda's the one that says, no, there's another, and it's supposed to be this dramatic idea. That ended up getting cut, which is perfectly fine because the way it ended up is perfect. I mean, looking back in hindsight now, yeah, it's perfect.
I don't know if it is, because I have some problems with Return of the Jedi, and pretty much one of my problems, because I like the sexual tension between the three, and try to remove that.
There really wasn't. There really wasn't. And after she has the start of the relationship with Han in Empire Strikes Back, and we have the "I love you, I know," that's pretty much done. I mean, it's
by that time it's done. But if you look at the beginning of the movie, when he gets to,
I think that the bottom line with that, and because that's always brought up, is the whole how she kisses him. I don't think that there's anything sexual towards that. I think it's just a way to just
rub it in Han's face.
Get under.
Yeah.
But
nerves.
for Luke, it was. He was very interested.
He was too at the end of the first movie.
Might be by the end of the second movie, because he just doesn't know. We don't know that for sure. It's kind of like that reveal that Vader's his father. Now we need a bigger reveal in Return of the Jedi, and we'll talk about that when we get to Return of the Jedi.
Incest.
I understand why they did it, but I think I would have liked it better if it was a character that was kind of behind the scenes, like we've seen here and there, but isn't like a main focus. And then we find out, boom, this is his sister after all. But back to Yoda, what they did with the puppet Yoda, the facial expressions, the way that they made him come to life is amazing. It frustrates me to watch the prequels because of the technology,
CGI.
The CG aspect, yeah.
There was such blowback over those. That's why they ended up having to go with a puppet.
For the
that's
sequels.
why when he makes an appearance in The Last Jedi, it's back to a puppet. And I think that there's a puppet also in Revenge of the Sith because of the blowback over the CGI. But this is a testament to Jim Henson and Frank Oz, the whole Henson family, the get-up that produced the Muppets. I mean, that's why Yoda is so expressive. I mean, because these guys they're geniuses. They created the Muppets. I mean, come on. Having him be tangible and something that Luke can touch and interact with is so much more believable, and it's so much more interesting than having it be, set against a green screen and a computer-generated blip, essentially.
What sells it for me is when Luke is trying to raise his X-Wing fighter out of the swamp, and the look on Yoda's face as anticipation, he kind of almost feels like, oh my, he's doing it. And I think that facial expression, to me, made Yoda really come to life. And I totally forget that this is a puppet. I feel like this is like a real character when they make expressive faces like that. And of course, like you said, Frank Oz voicing Yoda brings character, brings humor.
He was the primary puppeteer.
Yeah.
There was 3 total puppeteers, but he was the primary puppeteer. And it's funny that you mentioned it's hard to discriminate, but Herman Kirshner had an issue because he would start to give direction to the puppet instead of Frank Oz, and Frank Oz would have to hold his hand up and be like, I'm down here, you need to talk to me.
Right.
As much of a genius and creative mind as Lucas had, Jim Henson is equal to that creativity. There's no surprise that they were friends.
So I have one question here, and it's a big question. During his training, and when he's starting to kind of get it a little bit, he feels the presence of the dark side. And Yoda basically sends him to the cave. Is that all in his mind, or does Yoda have a Darth Vader thing that's just waiting to, like, for any Jedi that wants to, like, train? Does he have, like, special equipment for this? Or is it all in his mind? Because I'm trying to understand how he has access to a Darth Vader, whatever you want to call it.
On Dagobah, there is a spot, an area that is seeped in the dark side.
Kind of like The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi had kind of a same situation.
Yeah. Yoda's presence there kind of keeps the whole thing in balance. It's really all in Luke's mind. The way it's presented in the novelization is that it presents itself as Luke's greatest fear. Ultimately, what is supposed to be represented here, and it doesn't go...
It doesn't explain enough.
And explain it. Right. Yeah. It doesn't explain it very well, but it's supposed to represent that his fear is falling to the dark side.
Because he does say, remember your failure at the cave later on. But we're not really told truly what that failure was.
Well, he took his weapons.
Which he wasn't supposed to do.
and
Really,
which he wasn't supposed to do. It's at that point we've then been told by the Emperor and Vader that they're going to try to seduce and turn Luke to the dark side. His fear is being turned into Darth Vader, essentially. It's not explained in the best way.
I didn't think about it much when I was younger, but as I gotten older, I was just kind of curious on how Darth Vader just appeared on that planet, unless he had a clone that he kept on standby just in case Luke showed up.
Just in case Luke showed up.
A clone on standby. Nice.
Yeah.
The whole thing with Luke on Dagobah is it almost seems dreamlike, and I just had mentioned before the whole idea of Darth Vader in the hallways of the planet Hoth. The other really awesome, beautifully cut scene is of his X-Wing and Yoda bringing the X-Wing up out of the swamp. It's just gorgeous. It's the way it's shot and the way it's lit and everything is just perfect. It's like transcendental. It's so amazing to me. And as a kid, it just blew my mind. I love the beauty of it.
Do we feel like Obi-Wan's even needed? I feel like he could get everything he wants from Yoda. I just feel like the only reason why Obi-Wan's here was because Alec Guinness probably signed a 3-movie deal or whatever the case may be.
He actually didn't. The only 2 actors that had signed on for 3-movie deals were Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher.
I think you need to have Obi-Wan in this movie just as a reminder. You know, he was powerful, for lack of a better word, force in the first movie. You kind of really need him, especially his spirit to, as being in the force, if you will, to maintain his presence in this movie. I think it's very well needed.
So here's the thing, though. You have him die in Star Wars, and then he's talking to Luke in the X-Wing fighter, okay?
Right.
But now it's 3 years later. Has there been any conversations between him and Luke? And then all of a sudden, that's what I'm wondering here is, what has happened in those 3 years?
You ask these questions, and Disney's going to give you the answers as long as they keep going. Obi-Wan's communing with Yoda to try to figure out how to get Luke to Dagobah, because Obi-Wan didn't even know where Yoda was when they separate after Revenge of the Sith. There's a lot of things that go on, and Obi-Wan has been training Luke. I mean, you see a progression. You can tell that at the beginning of Empire, Luke he has some new Jedi powers. He gets his lightsaber from the frozen ice. He pulls it to himself by using the Force. So he's advanced some, but his training can't be completed with Obi-Wan being a Force ghost. So he needs to go to Yoda.
So I don't know if I agree with what you're saying here because of the fact that when he's on the ice planet and he sees Ben, hears Ben tells him what he needs to do. He questions it like this is the first time he's seen Ben ever since his death. When he gets to look for Yoda, he's like, he doesn't understand why he's there. He feels like that he might be crazy, that he might be hearing things. So to me, it plays out that Ben hasn't been doing anything with him for the last 3 years. And then all of a sudden he shows up and tells him to go see Yoda. That's how I take it based on how the movie plays out.
I've not interpreted it that way, but I can, see where you could say that. It's all a test of Luke's patience, too. You look at what happens. Luke, he gets the message from Obi-Wan to go to Dagobah. They leave Hoth, and he goes off to Dagobah. The first thing that happens to him is he crashes, because Dagobah's ecosystem it blanks out all of his instruments. He almost loses R2, because R2 gets eaten by that thing and then spit out. So Luke's patience is already being tested. I think ultimately, like you had said at the beginning when we were talking about Yoda and testing him, this is all part of the test. Now, I've heard it be discussed about whether or not Yoda's the one that made his instrument panel go out on the X-Wing and that's why he crashed. I'm not sure necessarily about that, but I don't take it as that he doesn't know why he's there. He knows he's there to find somebody. He's just so impatient and he's wanting to get things done quickly. He doesn't want
to run around a swamp picking up boxes
exactly.
He wants like direct training, like the fast track to being a Jedi.
Right, and that's why Yoda tells him that money and glory, Jedi wants not these things. he's telling Luke that this isn't all about.
That's what I want. So
you know,
I'm a
Money,
dark side
you know,
guy.
it's not. That's not what this is about. And that's what Luke wants, because that's all Luke's known since he's started down the Jedi path. I mean,
Money,
he blew
power,
up the
and
Death
women.
Star. Yeah, he blew up the Death Star. He's promoted to general, even though he loses his wingman all the time. It sucks to be.
That's
Luke's
true. He
wingman.
does.
You're
yeah.
coming with me. Hell, I am.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, no, peace out.
This is a good point. He's always losing his wingman.
Yeah, he loses them all. I mean, it's all a test. It's not like he doesn't know why he's there or if he's hearing things. Like I said, there's no other way that Luke would have learned to use the Force, like to get his lightsaber, unless Ben had taught him. But Ben didn't have a chance to teach him that on the Millennium Falcon.
And I get that, and I understand that, but I feel like it plays out that he is imagining things, that he is questioning what he heard or what he saw on that planet. I feel like that's what Luke is saying here, and I'm sure others do as well, until they read the side books or watch, other, Star Wars programs. And who knows what we'll get from Obi-Wan Season 2. Maybe he will go see Yoda. I mean, it's ever changing. To go back to Han and Leia, I think it's interesting that, when they are trying to get away from the Empire, that they go into the asteroid field, they're able to escape the TIE fighters, and then they see what's possibly a cave. Question here is, I guess this monster or whatever that lives in this asteroid keeps his mouth open. That's why things just kind of fly in. And
does the worm have a name?
Yeah, it doesn't.
I don't think so.
I mean, you have living creatures flying around inside of it. It's not like it's slowly digesting it. It doesn't seem like it's doing anything like that. But then they finally realize once he shoots the ground that they're in some type of living being and they have to escape it. Was it born in there as a small little reptile and then it just grew into something huge? I mean,
A giant asteroid floating around space? Inquiring minds want to know, Ken.
Yeah, it's a weird little thing. I mean, again, it's fun. It's interesting. And again, we see a little bit more of Han and Leia getting closer and closer. I do think it's funny, though, after he shoots the ground and everything is wobbling back and forth, that she's wobbling and falling and stuff, but Han, goes around her and just goes straight up into the Millennium Falcon and just leaves her behind. Help a girl out here.
So Wikipedia says that...
Wikipedia?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
It says that those are called exogorths, and the Minox can live inside them because they don't really have, a stomach.
All right.
They were in no danger except for Myox chewing on the power cables. Outside of that, they really weren't in any danger, were they?
Well, eventually they want to leave.
Yeah, if they're trapped in there. It's a space slug is what it is.
There's probably a little baby that grew up to be big thing. Can't get out of it.
That's a great sequel, Space Slug. Space Slug.
This is one of those things that you really can't overthink, because it doesn't really kind of make sense.
I have to. I'm on a podcast.
There's a few things with Star Wars that you just kind of have to take face value. They put them into a different environment, and they have to escape something. I mean, it's how the Empire Strikes Back works. We get ourselves into a situation, and we got to escape. Here,
over and over again.
Escape.
I have a problem here with this escape. The Falcon doesn't go into the hyperdrive again, and so they have to turn around and pretend that they're going to attack the big ship, and then somehow they go really fast, and then they're attached to the ship all of a sudden?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Magnets?
They have a cloaking device, and that's how they disappear. So they don't necessarily just immediately attach to the ship. He flies over the bridge of the Star Destroyer, and then to disguise themselves, they use the cloaking device.
When do we find out they have a cloaking device? Why did they just use the cloaking device?
That's how they disappear. That's
Klingons,
why Captain
man. Klingons.
That's why Captain Nita gets killed.
But when have they told us that it has a cloaking device? Because they even said no ship that big has a cloaking device.
No ship that small.
Oh, that's
has
small.
a cloaking
Sorry.
device. So there's your answer. He has one.
But he's not cloaked when he's attached to the ship.
Yeah, that's how they disappeared. That's how they're not visible on radar.
I thought they weren't visible on radar because they powered down.
No.
Or they're attached to the ship.
It's because they're cloaking.
And how about how big of litter bugs the Imperials are?
Yeah.
Those are big
space
things.
garbage.
Space garbage, yeah.
had they been crushed in the trash compactor on the Death Star, that's what the Death Star would have put out into the...
Oh, yeah.
I've never heard of this cloaking device before because they never use it ever again in any of the movies.
There's a lot of things that Lucas uses once and then never uses again.
But it makes no sense, especially if they're trying to evade all these TIE fighters.
Yeah,
Why? To me, it doesn't.
It's a Star Trek ripoff.
He has a cloaking device, and he flies over the bridge, and they disappear.
Then why don't they just keep on going? Why do they have to attach themselves to the ship?
They're in amongst, like 10 or 12 Star Destroyers?
Yeah.
So somebody's going to see them.
If it's cloaked, they can't see them at all. I mean, is it a cloaking device that works for like 15 seconds?
Where they're attached, nobody's going to see them.
I get the attachment. I get that. I just don't buy the cloaking device because he doesn't mention that they're going to go use a cloaking device. Everybody on the ship, Leia and C-3PO, don't understand what he's doing. There was no indication that he's telling anybody that he's going to switch over to the cloaking device. I don't buy the cloaking device. The only person that talks about it is the guy that's on the Imperial ship, and he's like, it's too small to have a cloaking device, and that's it. And I guess he was wrong, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it cost him his life.
I guess it does. I don't know. What do you think, Eric? Did you think there was a cloaking device?
I don't remember there ever being mentioned cloaking device, but maybe I was not listening. I was under the impression that they flew to the bridge to startle them because they weren't expecting that, and then immediately magnetized or stuck themselves to the ship to make it seem like they were part of the ship so the radar wouldn't pick them up. I don't remember anything about a cloaking device, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm closer to that than I think of the cloaking device. It would have been kind of cool to have a cloaking device, and then you could have used it in all the other movies. But
and you had a good point, Ken. If you had a cloaking device, why didn't you just get out of there? Right?
Sneak off, slowly just take a, and then...
Isn't that what the Klingons do?
And then you wouldn't have Boba Fett. And here's the other thing. Boba Fett is just kind of behind them. How do they not see somebody following them?
I don't know.
Where's the rearview mirror on the Millennium Falcon?
Yeah, right?
Well, I mean, they're able to detect when another ship is coming.
And why is Boba Fett hanging out in the garbage?
Yeah.
He's guessing that that's what Han's going to do.
Oh.
Because wouldn't they be checking to see if there's anybody following them? When you're trying to escape, isn't the first thing you want to do is look in the rear mirror to see if anybody's
They don't have
behind
a
you?
rearview mirror.
I
was being
get
facetious.
I get what you're saying, but I'm sorry, but if you're fleeing, you need to know your surroundings, and I think it's bogus.
I think here there's a couple of things. One,
suspend reality.
Exactly. The second part of this, they're more concerned about getting to Cloud City and getting the hyperdrive fixed than they are about everything else. Because all of a sudden, all of the Star Destroyers jump into hyperspace and are gone. So they think that they've pulled this off. And so there would be no reason for them to think that Boba Fett was in the trash. Now, granted, Boba Fett probably pulls out a little bit
too soon.
He probably follows a little bit too fast, but it does what it's supposed to do. Now, if you want to tell me that how the timeline doesn't fit, Darth Vader's Super Star Destroyer is not seen by Han and Leia and Chewbacca hovering over Cloud City.
Well, it has a cloaking device.
They have to be there because they beat them there.
Well, that I get because of the fact that they could go to a hyperdrive and the Millennium Falcon can't, so they're slower.
They're hiding the super ship in the clouds.
That thing is so big, though, it would be hard
Cloud
to hide.
City, yeah, Cloud City is not planet. It's inside the planet. It's a gas planet because that's what they're mining is the gas. The Executor would have been maybe it's on the other side of the side of the planet, but I mean, if you're talking that makes a little bit more sense. As far as how they get away, it's pretty ingenious. They just float away.
I get it, and I think if you just had Boba Fett still in the garbage monitoring them and not actually following, I accept that a lot better than because you just mentioned he follows them a little too quickly. He's probably a little too close to them, in my opinion. If he just stayed with the garbage and then just reported to Vader saying, hey, the Millennium Falcon was in the garbage, this is their trajectory. It looks like they're going in this direction. Because basically that's what he does anyway. He doesn't need to follow them to a certain point. He could already tell Vader where most likely they're going.
Even though Lando is kind of a shady character, we never really know if he's had any run-ins with Boba Fett before, because they don't seem like that they've been any sort of relationship. So Boba
he
Fett
calls
still
him the
has
bounty
to...
hunter. Like he
Right.
just calls him the bounty hunter.
That's because the original script, nobody knew who Boba Fett was, because he didn't get named officially until Return of the Jedi. But because of now the special editions being out, and we had the prequels that established who Boba Fett and Jango Fett were, they had to add lines into the special editions. So that's where they call him the Bounty Hunter and Boba Fett all in the same movie. The Bounty Hunters are all really cool. That's one of the other cool scenes in the movie. If you can pause it quick enough, you can see all of the bounty hunters that Vader's brought together. And there was a series of books called The Bounty Hunters that highlighted each one of those.
Yeah, they were talking about having
characters.
a possible spin-off of this that focused on the bounty hunters. And I think that's something that maybe Disney Plus should reconsider doing now, is a movie based on those bounty hunters, not just the Mandalorians, but all the bounty hunters. And that would have been kind of interesting. I think it's interesting when you get to the Cloud City and they're trying to get permission to land and they're being fired upon. Is that stormtroopers in the ship next to them? Because...
No, it's Cloud City personnel, but I have a feeling that they're being given the runaround so that Vader can make the deal with Lando before they land. Because they get fired upon, but it's not anything that's going to damage the Millennium Falcon.
Right,
it's just kind of a
warning shot across the nose or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe the deal hasn't been finalized, like you said. Maybe by the time they land, and maybe that's
it's the only thing that makes sense, because then all of a sudden, then it's okay for them to land. Billy D. Williams is cool.
He is, especially in 1980. I mean, he's the epitome of cool.
But I'm going to go really quickly back to what you just said. That's probably why he's late to greet them.
Absolutely.
All of that's being set up, and of course we don't know that. That's exactly what's being done, because the stormtroopers are in Cloud City at that point, along with Vader and Boba Fett.
So is that guy with robotic head or whatever that is?
Lobot?
Is he an android?
No. The way Lobot is described is, I guess, it's a human being that decided to live in servitude. So they kind of turn into an android where they're still human, but their brain is all computerized.
Right, because
they become the servants.
Yeah, that scene where he's like, it looks like he's like shut down, and then all of a sudden, he presses his Apple smartwatch, and then all of a sudden he opens up his eyes.
That whole thing too is kind of a takeoff of THX 1138, Lucas's first movie.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
It's kind of a throwback to that. But yeah, no, they're not. It's not technically an android. It's a real human, but their brains have been taken out and they've been given like a computerized brain.
I guess originally he was captured by the Empire, and then they had I think there was a novel about it where Luke and Lando go to try to go rescue
Lobot,
and try to find Luke's lightsaber, which good luck on that.
Well, Maz Kanata
somehow she got it, yeah.
There's a lot of stories about how that lightsaber gets found on the planet. But it would have been interesting to see which one they would have chosen. But J.J. Abrams, I guess, just decided to abandon that.
There's a lot of things that they abandoned. I have to admit, though, one of the things I really like here is Lando, of course, is betraying them, and he's going to, give them over to Darth Vader. The fact that when they come in and Darth Vader has dinner, I mean, like a dinner table waiting for them.
Catered feast, right?
Yeah, come and sit down and let's have a
We'd be honored if you, if you
join us.
Okay.
I think it's kind of cool, though, when Han shoots Vader, he's actually protecting Princess Leia first. That's how great their relationship has come. He's putting himself in front of her.
Them.
Yeah, between them, which I think is a great...
I think it's pretty awesome that Vader just stops the blaster bolt.
But I wondered if they actually did have dinner. I'm curious if they actually got to sit down for one last meal before they tortured him.
It's like, more potatoes, Solo?
He gets to meet his father-in-law.
How's the fish?
Torturing scene is weird.
It's supposed to be more expanded than that when they were torturing him. It was supposed to be more graphic, but because of little kids, they didn't want to be too graphic with it. But the whole point was only to torture them for Luke to have his vision. So Luke would come there and try to rescue them. As Han says when they bring him back to the cell, they didn't ask me any questions.
It's so that they can create the pain so the attaches off to Luke. It also serves to weaken Han so he can be put into carbonite. It probably helps him that he was, because if you hear C-3PO, he says to Chewie, as long as he survived the freezing process, he'll be
perfectly safe
in carbonite.
Yeah, but I mean, they didn't really do that when they tried to freeze Luke. He fought for a little bit, and then Vader was like,
they never
too
did
easy.
Freeze Luke.
No, but they tried, but they never got him to be so tuckered out. I mean, Vader basically said it's all too easy, and then thinks he freezes him.
Yes, I love. He's like, all too easy.
All too easy, and then he's like, impressive, most impressive.
Your gymnastic skills are very impressive.
The German judge gives you a 9.5.
This is my favorite lightsaber duel out of all 9 movies. I think a lot of it is how it's shot. I think that the lighting and everything about how it's shot is just gorgeous. I love the silhouettes of Luke and Vader. The only thing that's illuminated is their lightsabers. I think it's an iconic shot.
Very iconic.
What I like about this fight scene is that, for the most part, Vader's just using one hand.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of The Princess Bride. I'm also not left-handed.
Yes,
it's one of those situations where he's just kind of toying with them. He notices that he does have skill, but he doesn't go into that full two-handed mode until towards the end. He starts walloping on him with two hands and then just goes like crazy on him. It's a great scene because of the fact that it's played out a little bit longer, and we have 3 different versions. We have the one that's happening in the carbon freezing area. Then we have the one where Vader is throwing stuff at him. You know, he's throwing anything that he could find, stuffed animals, things of that nature. You know, it goes out the window, and then we get that third final act of the fight. And I think that's why it might be one of the greatest ones, if not the best one. And each part is different than the other. The first one is, like I said, Vader's kind of just toying with him. The second one, he kind of tried to test a little bit more skills by throwing stuff at him. And then the third one, Vader's like, okay, enough of this crap. I'm just going to chop off your hand and see how you like that. It's very impressive to see that. Yeah.
I think that being in 3 different environments helps a lot too. And each one is shot differently. I like when we're in the second part, when we're beneath the carbon freezing thing. Camera is almost in a perspective of Vader. And so you're kind of looking not quite over his shoulder, but it's from his perspective almost to start off with. And I think that's really kind of cool. And then, of course, how he uses the Force to throw things at Luke. You kind of get the feeling that he's getting a little bit, not necessarily desperate, but he wants to get it over with.
Yeah, he's tired of playing around at the end. I think it's funny when he's throwing stuff at him. At first, Luke, you know, he hits the first one, but then the other ones are hitting him, and he's like swinging at nothing, like he's got a baseball bat and he's just been hit by a pitch. Though it's weird when he gets thrown out the glass window. Before he gets thrown out, half that glass is still there, and then when they show him actually falling through it, that glass has all disappeared all of a sudden.
Oh.
I think it's a little bit of a bad
continuity error.
Yeah, continuity error there a little bit. And of course we get the big reveal of I am your father, which you said earlier before we started, most misquoted line of all time.
Yeah, it's the most misquoted line. Here's the thing with that. You talk about keeping secrets. It's pretty amazing that this was kept as close to the vest as it was.
That's true.
Because if you believe Mark Hamill, and Mark Hamill has a tendency to not embellish as much necessarily as Carrie Fisher used to, but has been known to weave a tale. But supposedly at the red carpet, the premiere, Harrison Ford was seated next to Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, of course. And when the reveal happens that I'm your father, reportedly, according to Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford punched him in the shoulder and said, "You never fucking told me about that," and was looking all hurt.
Really?
And,
by the way, Mark Hamill does a really good Harrison Ford when he tells that story.
Oh,
does he?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those moments that is amazing. I wish that I would have been able to experience that shocking moment without having seen Return of the Jedi already. Return of the Jedi was the first one that I saw. And so it wasn't necessarily that big of a shock. I wish that's one of those things that I could go back. They use the Men in Black, like, flashy thing. It eliminates it from my mind, and I could experience that for the first time.
I got to experience it at 8 years old. I wish I was a tad older. I wish I was more like closer to a teenager. I remember being in awe, be like, that's so weird. What's going to happen now? And so I remember it being such a big revelation, the prequels, because if you don't, you're going to take one of the most important things in history and you're going to dilute it. And unfortunately, at this part of time, even if you haven't seen Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back, you probably already know. That kind of sucks. So when my daughter wanted to watch this, I tried to tell her, no, watch it from the years that it was released. Don't go in chronological order. But of course, she doesn't agree with that. So by the time she got to Empire Strikes Back, it wasn't a big deal. I already knew that. Right. And I think that's what made this movie at the time considered better than the original.
You know how hard it is, though, to keep a secret today? The only thing that really even comes close to this in my generation, or my movie and TV viewing, would be the final episode of Seinfeld, which obviously sucked, but
they should have kept that a secret.
Should have kept that a secret, but that was held under wraps. I remember that I had a huge party at my house for that final episode. No one knew. Pre-internet, wasn't leaked out. You had no clue how this thing was going to happen. And it was the same with this. You would think this would be leaked out, but it wasn't.
When it was shot, only one person knew. They didn't even tell David Prowse, who played the body of Darth Vader. Lucas only told Mark Hamill. And then once they did the voiceover with James Earl Jones, he had to sign an NDA. This is one of the first times anybody ever heard of somebody signing an NDA on a movie set.
But I will say, as far as keeping secrets, they did a decent job of keeping Harrison Ford's name out of the last movie.
Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, they did a good job of keeping him out of Rise of Skywalker because of the fact, like, when me and Ted went to go see it, it was like, whoa, didn't see that coming. Whereas, like, Harrison Ford blew the secret when it came to Force Awakens about what was going to happen to his characters.
Yeah.
The night before, I believe it was.
The reason Rise of Skywalker, his appearance there was so surprising was because Harrison Ford had been so adamant that The Force Awakens was it.
Done,
He was done to have that one last moment. It's never even reported that he was ever on set. I mean, to keep that secret was really amazing.
One thing we didn't talk about Harrison Ford is his classic line of, I know.
Yeah.
Probably the best response to I love you in the history of, at least of sci-fi or fantasy movies.
It's the coolest response from the coolest character in Star Wars. It's just a badass response.
Took a lot of takes to get that.
It wasn't improvised. Harrison Ford came up with it before they started shooting and changed the script and said, no, that's not what Han would say. He says, I know.
Are you sure they didn't say, Harrison, it's time for your line? I know.
I know, yeah. The whole idea why Han was put in carbonite was something that needed to be changed as well. Because Harrison Ford wanted to be done with Star Wars after Empire Strikes Back. He lobbied for months with Lucas to kill him off.
Kill me now.
I mean, we're talking 1980. He's getting ready to do Blade Runner. He's going to be Indiana Jones. He's wanting to move on.
He doesn't want to be typecast.
The concession that was made was, well, we'll freeze you. Hopefully you'll want to come back for Return of the Jedi.
It's kind of like the Spock in Star Trek 2 when he dies and he does the remember thing. Well, we'll give you an out, and if you decide you want to come back. I say it's because of typecast, but he didn't mind doing now 5 Indiana Jones films. I felt like he is a talented actor that it didn't matter if he continued to do Star Wars films because he was so good doing what he did. In fact, until I saw The Devil's Own with him and Brad Pitt, I adored almost every movie that I saw with Harrison Ford in it. And I don't hate that movie, but seeing that in the theater was a snooze fest.
What about that movie he did with Anne Heche?
That was after
6
days and 7 nights.
Yeah.
But up to then, he was the moneymaker. Everything that he touched, it made money. For the 80s and up to the mid-90s, he was a go-to star. There wasn't anybody bigger than probably Harrison Ford. I mean, if you think about it, you have, of course, the Indiana Jones series, But then you have the Jack Ryan series. And like you said, Blade Runner, everything that he was in, people bought, because Harrison Ford is that kind of actor.
Everything he touched turned to gold for a while. He's also much older than Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, too. Parts of it seem silly to him. He was out of that era of, I don't want to be in a fantasy movie. I can understand kind of where he's coming from. I think some of his cantankerousness towards Star Wars fans throughout the years, there was, for quite a while, he had kind of a disdain for ever even starring in Star Wars. And
that frustrates me.
It's kind of crap, because without Star Wars,
you're not able to do all the other things that you've done.
Yeah. Without Star Wars, you're definitely not making Blade Runner with Ridley Scott.
Or Indiana Jones.
I
mean, he was a carpenter. He was working more as a carpenter than an actor when he got the part in Star Wars. We talked about it in the last episode. He wasn't being even considered for Star Wars until they realized, after all the back and forth with the other actors that were reading for Han, that he was the right choice. So he should just be grateful, is how I look at it. So I want to talk about one more thing, and that's the added stuff that is put into the special edition. Whoa. So, The Empire Strikes Back, out of all three of these movies, in my opinion, is the best at doing that. So, like the Cloud City, there's some things I really like about the Cloud City, like the fact that it looks more like a city when you're inside.
Right.
You have the windows and you see stuff. Now, the CGI has become a little dated. All the stuff that I see now, it feels like you needed to get a little revision of your update. If you're gonna
update a little bit.
Yeah, because
the digital copies are cleaned up pretty good. I'll say this about the special editions: The Empire Strikes Back is probably the least touched of all of the original three movies. That's because it doesn't need to be touched a lot. There wasn't a whole lot that needed to be done here.
Except the Emperor.
There was more details. That's one case where the reshoot and put Ian McDiarmid in as the Emperor, I think that actually works.
Works better.
It works better because it's more into the story. I can forgive that. When we talk about Return of the Jedi, there are things that are, in my opinion, that are unforgivable, that I can't in any circumstance overlook. But here in Empire, they do a very good job of that. And ultimately, too, the way the movie ends with Luke getting a new hand and he's looking out the medical bay. Everybody's like, it ends on such a down note. I don't know. There's still hope at the end of Empire. Luke and Leia are together. They have a plan with Lando and Chewie that they're going to go get Han back. While it is kind of a downer, there's still hope there. And I ultimately like how the movie ends.
I think the difference here is, of course, with Star Wars, as you stated in the last episode, it can stand by itself. And that the ending can be a final ending. You could just put that puppy to bed and everything is good to go. Whereas Empire Strikes Back leaves you kind of like on a cliffhanger. And sometimes people like to have everything wrapped up in a bow and they don't want to have to wait another 2-3 years for that sequel.
It is kind of a cliffhanger. I will say, though, that if it ended that way, and that was the last we saw of these characters, there would still be some wanting for more, but I think it still is a satisfying ending.
Oh, like if it just ended, like that was it, 2 movies, have a nice day?
Right.
Yeah. But with Han being in Carbonite, it just screams sequel again.
Right. The biggest debate to come out of this, too, in between Empire and Return of the Jedi, Harrison Ford and George Lucas make Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, is Raiders of the Lost Ark Han Solo's fever dream while he's in Carbonite?
All right, we're getting silly here. No.
Wow.
No.
Could be.
No.
Fever dream going back to the 1930s. No.
Could be.
No, could not be. Sorry.
And looking for an artifact of gods.
Yes. So for Star Wars,
he said hell.
So for Star Wars, is there even a time frame, like a year, that this is supposed to be, or are we just as like in the future fantasy world? You don't have like a year, like Buck Rogers in the 25th century.
Right. The way the Star Wars universe works, Star Wars is considered like year 0 because everything before is considered before the Battle of Yavin, or BBY. everything after is considered after the Battle of Yavin. So kind of like how we have BC and AD for our timelines. The blowing up of the first Death Star is considered the 0 point of the Star Wars universe.
Not before
Which
Luke
makes
and
sense.
after Luke?
No, because that's the event that started everything. And so I think it's fitting that that's how it works. But
All
yes.
right, so there's
Well,
definitely
it says-
no Nazis.
It says
No,
a long time
it's
ago
just
in a
one-
galaxy far, far away, so that's telling me that it happened a long time ago. So it's not set.
No, of course, I'm just joking.
Right.
But
It's
are
one of
you
those
joking?
funny-
I could see someone bringing that up in a serious
It,
conversation and debating it.
it's one of those things that's kind of funny to think about.
I guess.
It's kind of a, in a jokey sort of way. But no, yeah, that's how the timelines work. So technically, Empire Strikes Back is considered year 3 after the Battle of Yavin.
Did they have dinosaurs back then? Before Yavin?
They got too big and
Imperial
fat and
walkers.
died. And then the Arabs came
Yeah.
and bought Mercedes Benzes.
They had Imperial walkers.
They had Wampas.
All right. Well, Ken, why don't you tell us your thoughts on this movie? Kick it off.
Well, Star Wars Empire Strikes Back is a well-directed movie. I think George Lucas handing the reins over was the right thing to do. Bringing writers to kind of fix the script that he had was the right thing to do. For the most part, this is very well edited. I don't enjoy it as much as A New Hope because of the fact that it's a little bit darker, whereas A New Hope is more of that Robin Hood, we said Flash Gordon, all that stuff. That it feels more like that. And it has a start, middle, and end, where this one has a start and a middle that kind of requires a little bit more from the Return of the Jedi, which we'll talk about next time. So it does miss a little bit for me in some areas, but very minor things that I've just been playing with throughout this podcast. This movie for me is an A-, probably easily in the top 50 of my favorite movies of all time. I agree with Ted in that the lightsaber duel is probably the best of the Star Wars movies. But I do feel like there's a lot of things that, of course, there are questions that have to be answered, and they get to be answered in the next movie. And I think that's why, for me, it's not a complete movie, and that's why it's just a slightly below Star Wars A New Hope. So again, A-.
Okay. I agree with everything you said, except for one thing. I like that this movie is darker than the first one. I think it plays well being darker. I think you need to go from that positive, upbeat New Hope into a little bit darker because it is The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire has the upper hand, so you want it to be darker. I agree that the directing reins being turned over was clearly a positive, since George Lucas doesn't know how regular humans interact. You can clearly see that this movie has much emotion built into it. The plot twists, the character twists are just incredible. It's a great movie. I do love this movie. It's right up there with A New Hope, though. I mean, each movie has its positives and its negatives, and it's hard for me to really determine which movie I think is far superior. This one, for me, it's tough, but I'm going to give this one an A- as well. It's teetering between them. I think you pretty much summed this one up very well, Ken. Very well indeed. So A- for me.
And I agree with you that it needed to be darker. I'm
Yes.
not saying that it could.
Right.
It definitely needed to be darker because you have to go that route. When you have a trilogy like this, the middle movie always has to be that connector, like we see with Back to the Future, the 3 movies there.
Yeah.
Even though Back to the Future 2 is no way in comparison to The Empire Strikes Back,
Right.
but it
That's
suffers.
to say it, put it mildly.
Yeah.
Or Back to the Future 1.
It does have to do one thing important, and that's connect
Tie the
first
movies.
and
Yeah.
tie the movies together. But like Back to the Future 2 is a darker movie. But it all depends on what you really enjoy in a movie. Do you like that darker kind of feel to your Space Odyssey, or do you like the happy ending? But I agree with you. It definitely needed to be darker. Ted,
Okay.
what's your thoughts on it, my friend?
I agree 1000%. The handing over the directorial reins of Empire Strikes Back is exactly what this trilogy needed. Because as we see when Lucas has complete control of the prequels, how quickly it goes off the rails. This is an awesome movie. Whereas a Star Wars, A New Hope, is in my top 5 Empire just falls out of that top 5. If I'm looking at it from a Star Wars point of view, Empire's probably my favorite. And the reason being is because this is where a lot of the painting gets painted. A lot of the universe building is done here. We find out more about characters. We are introduced to more characters. We get a fuller vision of what this universe that Lucas is creating gets filled in. It is darker. We get to see just how evil Darth Vader can be. And this is really the last time we really see Darth Vader as Darth Vader. And I think that's one of the things that holds a lot for me in this, because he's scary. And this is really the last time he's scary. I don't know, there's just something about this movie that it resonates with me. We didn't even talk about like the scene that's so brief that you have to pause it just right to get to see all of the bounty hunters that Vader's employing. Each one of those characters got a backstory because of, the time in between movies after Return of the Jedi. So we know all of those characters, and there's so many things here that are so much fun. As far as a movie goes, I don't know if there's a Star Wars movie that is as gorgeous as Empire Strikes Back. There are some legitimate, beautiful cinematography shots in this movie that are just unparalleled in the rest of the Star Wars universe.
That's weird because this director wasn't known for any of that.
Right.
But somehow he pulls it off brilliantly.
It's great. This movie is a solid A+ for me. This is going to be no shocker.
None here.
I will say that even for the special edition, whereas if we're going to go back to Star Wars, the special edition is still going to be an A+, but it's closer to the A than the A+, the uncut version, the original version. And then we'll discuss Return of the Jedi next. Even Lucas going back and adding things couldn't hurt this movie. It's a solid A+ for me.
All right. Well, no shock there. Well, we all gave it in the A range, so obviously we like the movie. All right, next podcast, we're talking 1983, Return of the Jedi. Ted, tell us where they can find us on the World Wide Web.
We can be found on Twitter at @hookedon_movies. And whatever podcast version you're listening to us on, whether it be Spotify, Good Pods, Apple, if you can, click the like and subscribe button and leave us a 5-star review. It helps us get noticed. And also, the more reviews we get, the closer we get to our goal of hopefully maybe one day being Rotten Tomatoes certified.
And Ken, who is our administrator for Facebook, has been really posting some very interesting articles and reads. So if you haven't had a chance, get to our Facebook page and really check out some of them. I think you will be very happy and surprised at some of the stuff Ken has been posting. And tell us about that, Ken.
Well, you could join us on our Facebook page, Hooked on Movies. Feel free to join in the discussion. If you have a movie that you're interested in us doing, let us know. If you want to critique us on how we're doing so far with Star Wars or with any of our other podcasts that we've done so far, feel free to do so. I wanted to read a review that we got on Apple Podcasts from a reviewer, goes by the name of SCHMAKE, Shemake6874. So he posted this on the Apple site. He says, "Outstanding podcast. I love this podcast because it feels like these guys are coming from my point of view and go into great detail with each movie reviewed. I cannot wait till their next episode drops." That is something that we love to hear. Keep it coming.
Yes.
When I read that, it made me have a desire to keep on going with this. There are days where, the editing process can take long, sometimes giving up time to watch other movies and do other things because we want to do this podcast. But when I read reviews like this, it makes me want to get to the next one. So thank you.
Obviously, that person is very smart, especially if he agrees.
Very smart indeed.
The force is with that one.
Absolutely.
Especially if he agrees with me more than Ken, that's even makes him even smarter. So.
No, we don't know about that. I still don't know about the cloaking device.
We can agree to disagree.
You still made us watch One-on-One.
Hey, people enjoyed that episode, so hey.
Apparently they do. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Hope you will catch us on our next episode for the Return of the Jedi, and we can wrap up this Star Wars version of our podcast, and eventually we'll move on to the prequels and the J.J. Abrams stuff. Maybe we'll eventually one day get to all of them. Who knows, right?
Oh, yes. Definitely.
All right. Yes, I know. We will definitely get there. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. And as always, I'm not wearing any pants. Film at 11.
See you at the movies.
See you next time on Hooked on Movies.